morning, everyone. This is actually more people than I expected at this time of the day, so thanks a lot for coming and listening to my talk. Looks like migrations still are a topic for some of you. So let me start with one very simple question. Who here has moved houses recently? I know at least one person in the room who's renovating and building a new home currently, and I see some hands. Great. And I think that's a picture everyone can relate to. Everyone has moved at some point, and we all have our personal experiences. So let's dive into that picture for a moment. I can feel a whole bunch of emotions looking at it. So there is excitement, motivation in the beginning. It's really great to set up something new, but I also think of very stressful moments while moving. And then you get to that point where you just want it to be done and over. Um, yeah, so if you have moved more than once, probably, you know that no move is ever the same. You learn something every time, and there are always new challenges. And honestly, you probably saw this coming. That's exactly how I would describe migrations in software projects. So a migration is like moving into a new house, or maybe to be more precise, to build and renovate a new home and then move into it. And that's the picture I want to use for this talk. Sorry. And it's actually an analogy that Sitecore uses itself. I recently heard that at the Partner Day in Düsseldorf, and it really stuck with me because I could really relate. Today, I'll show you two real projects, as already introduced, with two very different starting points. That's why I named it Yesterday, Today, and they had very different challenges. Of course, a quick introduction about myself. For the start, my name is Anke Kiener. I am working as a Sitecore architect at MSQDX, and I've been working with Sitecore for quite a while now on different projects. And migrations have actually been a big part of my daily work over the last couple of years. Um, I'm a first time Sitecore MVP, which I'm a little proud of and very grateful for. Yeah, that's all about me. Let's have a quick look on the agenda. We've already set the scene, so introduction is done. And now I'll walk you through my two real migrations. One very early one, that's the part yesterday, which actually went live during SUGCON last year in Antwerp, and which made me miss a lot of sessions because I was in my hotel room doing the migration, last moment fixes. And then I'll talk about a very recent one that is going live next week. So fingers crossed. And I will compare those two migrations, and then I want to share with you how I would approach my next migrations. So let's start with the first migration. If we stay in our picture, this was our first move, and this was the house where we were coming from. So some of you might recognize this one. I presented at Symposium last year, and I did a talk about that migration on its own. Yeah, and so we had that picture there of the beautiful castle we built. Um, so that was built over years, extended again and again. It was a grown system on Sitecore XP that you might all know. You all have those projects. We had 30 sites, or almost 30 sites, 27 or 26, and a very large amount of content, as you can imagine. We had lots of different integrations. Um, yeah, a really strong system, but also quite complex. We had a mature standard Sitecore XP setup um, with custom implementations. Those are all those little towers and stuff built on top of the castle. Let me quickly show the whole notes. Um, yeah, what worked well in that old situation? Um, As I mentioned, the custom implementations, they were tailored exactly to business needs. And we had a team with strong XP know-how. And I think you can relate to that. You might be coming from the same stage. But over time, things became very complex. And you may also all know the downsides with old XP solutions, not telling you anything new. Um, Deployments were not easy, feature releases were slow, and I don't want to talk about upgrades to Sitecore 10 or something like that anymore. Um, yeah, and most importantly, this house was not built for the future. So at some point, it just didn't feel right anymore, and it was time to move. And that's exactly where the decision came from. I was lucky to have a client who was really brave and interested in doing new stuff. Um, so we wanted to become faster and use that new stuff more flexible and move towards a composable architecture. So, what did this shift actually look like? We wanted to build a castle like this, something shiny and new. Um, Before, as I said, we had a typical Sitecore XP project with a monolithic CMS, backend driven renderings, and most of the logic living in the backend in C Sharp. Afterwards, things should look different. Um, so this is just the logos for completeness. Afterwards, we moved to XM Cloud. The CMS became a headless place where more or less only the content lives, and everything was API first. So we had a front end in Next.js that takes over much of the responsibilities. And all the integrations are handled through APIs and services now, instead of being built directly into the CMS C# code. In our analogy, again, this is a completely new house. It's a different way of building houses. So how did we actually approach this and manage to get to that shiny new castle? If we stay in the picture, we couldn't just pack everything into boxes and go and move. We had to plan carefully for that move. So we started with a lot of preparation. First of all, we were building knowledge, of course. We were learning from the community, attending SUGCONs, reading a lot of blog posts, etc. And we were running proof of concepts ourselves for the key parts like XM Clouds, search, whatever. Yeah, and it was pretty clear very early that some things just couldn't stay the way they were. There were clear guidelines to follow. You had to remove all personalization, so go from XP to XM. You had to find a new solution for replacing Solar Search or forms because it wasn't there with XM Cloud anymore. And of course, we had to get rid of all our customizations. So the first step was to understand what we actually had, what was in that big house. So we analyzed our whole existing solution, and not only our code, but also the content. So all the features our sites had, etc. Sometimes you lose track if you are working on a project for a couple of years. Yeah, so we did that together with the client, of course, and the editors, and we grouped our sites by functionality and complexity. And based on that, we defined our strategy. So we decided to start small and increase complexity. So, for example, with building components, of course, we started with the very simple ones, the text components or text image components. And when we gained confidence, we then stepped onto more complex ones like fancy teasers or, I don't know, some components with related data, or we have an event schedule, or yeah, other complex components. And we did the same for the sites. So we made up a plan to migrate our sites step by step. So we started with the simple ones with the little feature sets, implemented all the features needed for them. Then we migrated those sites. And after that, we implemented the next features needed for the next wave of migration, so to say. So that was our overall approach. Yeah, and there were a lot of tasks to do, and some of them could be done in parallel, which was quite helpful. So, what did this mean in practice? So, we had two big shifts. First of all, the front end, of course. We rebuilt everything in Next.js. Most of the logic moved to the front end, and that really is a big shift. And second, we had to shift all of our integrations. For example, we used to import data into Sitecore in the old world. And now in that XM Cloud setup, we are using API-based integrations and just querying the PIM data live, so to say, or on demand. Some of our custom code and our features needed to be implemented anew in own APIs, and we made them running as microservices in Azure. And so overall, you can say the responsibilities shifted quite significantly. And this is the moment where you realize this new house is something completely different. And then, of course, there was our content, as I said, a lot of content. In our analogy again, maybe all the furniture, all our belongings, everything we have. And we had a lot of it, more than 30 sites with thousands of pages. So we had to move that, and that became a whole topic on its own. Um, but we found a solution, a very simple one, back then, yesterday, as I said. So we built a little custom migration tool, a command line tool, that was based on Sitecore serialization. Um, and that's very simple what it does. So we are pulling the content from XP via serialization. Then we are transforming it, just changing some GUIDs and what's new. And then we are pushing the YAML files back to the XM Cloud instance. Yeah, and it's not looking nice, but it worked. Um, yeah. And that's actually a screen recording of a full content transfer, not fast forwarded. So, yeah. So, what did we learn from this? Looking back, the first migration was a huge learning experience, of course. A few things really stood out. So, first of all, start simple and increase complexity step by step. That worked out really well for us. Second, invest early in front end and API skills, because that's where all the complexity goes to. You really need to build your knowledge there. And finally, expect unknowns, especially when working with a platform that is still evolving. And as I said, it was yesterday, so there were changes almost every day in the SaaS solution. Yeah, that was the unknowns, and that was yesterday. So what happens if you do that for a second time? So today we are working on another migration, and you might think, we are experienced now, we know how this works. We just do what we did before, we take it or pull it out of the drawer and do it again. But it doesn't work like that. So we were at a really different point in time when we started this migration. The platform has changed, and most importantly, we are moving in with different people. So they have different expectations and their own ideas. So, and there was a symposium in between those two migrations, and a lot has changed for in that time. There were big announcements and a lot of changes. So the setup was very different. Um, there was less legacy, I was going to say, but I would say there was less known legacy. So we didn't know the old XP project in this case. Um, there was no content migration planned at all. And the requirements seemed to be very clear from the beginning. So, as I said, the other one's ideas from the one moving in with us were pretty clear and strongly shaped by the stakeholders. We were just handed over a Figma design and some ideas, I would say. So, to stay in the picture, we were sort of given a blueprint and asked to build a new house. Sounds pretty easy, but of course, it came with very different challenges. Let's take a quick look at the technical setup of the second project as well, just for completeness and because it differs a bit. So we have SitecoreAI as a headless CMS. So you see the name changed. Again, a Next.js frontend and several external services. We have Site for Search in this project, Binder as a DOM. That was a difference. And some other integrations like language wire, etc. So we have our blueprint for the house, and we have the tools to build the new house. As mentioned, the project started at another point of time. The platform itself has evolved, not just the name as we saw, but also in terms of capabilities. Between those two projects, there was Symposium, some major updates and announcements, and we were sort of we were working with a moving target. We now have more things available out of the box. We have SitecoreAI, including search, etc. The page builder has improved a lot in the meantime. So we decided to have a strong focus on editor experience. And it was our goal to only edit in page builder. And reduce the situations where you need to switch back to content editor. So that's what we focused on. And of course, AI is also becoming a bigger part of the platform. Although I have to admit, in our case, we are not actively using it. Because of client reasons. And one of the biggest changes for us was that marketplace apps are now available. And you might have heard a lot of it at this SUGCON. So we have public and custom marketplace apps, and they bring back the level of flexibility and extensibility that was missing before and that we really needed. So, for example, in our old project, we had to create our Next.js apps, components, to extend functionality. Now we can have marketplace apps, and we use them, for example, for editing tables. I don't know who attended the workshop of Sebastian yesterday, so he mentioned it as well. So we are really extensively using marketplace apps in this project. To have custom fields, for example, for editing tables or charts, or even the PIM integrations, etc. But we still faced some challenges, of course. Although we reused a lot of what we learned before, we again followed the same approach, of course. What's working, you don't change it. So we started simple and increased complexity step by step again. And we were very aware that front-end competence is crucial. But still, it remains a challenge for us. With all the responsibility moving to the Next.js app, we need front-end developers with a much deeper understanding of programming. And I don't mean that in any negative way. The road just simply changed. So it's no longer just about UI, etc., but it's also about logic, APIs, caching, error handling, null checks, you name it. Page builder, again on the list. So that still is a topic. As I said, we plan to have everything editable in page builder, but we are facing issues. For example, when talking about reference data. So we are still hoping that it continues improving. Integrations were a new challenge. You saw different logos, so it was a bit different. And very project-specific changes were complex features or components to implement. So that was a challenge in this project. And of course, there were also learnings in this project. What did we learn from the second migration? A few things really stood out. First, we now can create components very fast and easily. That's where you really see the productivity gain of this setup. I think good data modeling is still very essential. We now have a much clearer understanding of data fetching strategies, which is really important and something you should really look into. We talked a lot about where to use what. So that was a good learning. And we learned that marketplace apps can be a big game changer. They allow you to extend the platform. Sorry for repeating, um, but it was the most important learning on this one. And yeah, the front end skills again. So overall, we are definitely faster now in some areas with this second migration, but still need to be very deliberate in others. So to sum it up, we had two moves, basically the same task, but completely different realities, even though both were migrations. And that's my key point. The biggest difference was not the platform or the technical side. It was the project and its requirements itself. Yeah, we have different requirements, different constraints, and different people. And the platform involved, yes. But I would say project contact matters even more. So the difference is more in the project than in the technique. So now we've seen two very different migrations. Um, so the question is, what would I do if I could start or need to start another migration tomorrow? Of course, first of all, I would stick to what worked. Um, Again, start simple, increase complexity. You've heard that before. And that approach still holds up. Second, surprise, surprise, I would try to build a strong front-end team. And third, I would design editor experience right from the beginning, really important. And that's really where you make people happy. And one more thing that I haven't talked about yet, take care of the fundamentals. Um, of course, when rebuilding everything, it's a good point to rethink accessibility and, of course, other things like SEO, GEO, all the new buzzwords. That's the chance. If you're rebuilding, do those things right and right from the beginning. Just make sure they are in place. And finally, of course, take advantage of all the new capabilities and the new possibilities that are around and that you heard of at SUGCON, for example. So things like marketplace apps, I've mentioned that. Then I wanted to mention Pathway. Don't know who's familiar with it yet. So I showed you the content migration, how we did it. Of course, tomorrow, if I had to migrate thousands of sites again, I would not do it manually again. I would use AI for that. Um, Ideally, a tool given to me by Sitecore, like Pathway, but we tested it and it's not quite there, I would say. So maybe if it's not tomorrow, but the day after, we can use it. I don't know. Yeah, and of course, the great possibilities that we heard about vibe coding. I mean, I don't know who attended the session before this one with Russell. Unreal what we can do now with vibe coding. So that really makes a huge difference and is a new way of working. And we should be open to that and use whatever is there. Yeah, but although those things make a huge difference, they don't replace good decisions. That's still up to you. And that brings me to what I would really focus on. So, first of all, plan what to take. Not everything needs to move. Be intentional about what you keep and what you leave behind. Um, I bet we all have those unpacked boxes in our basement from, the move before the last move. And you don't want to have that in technical solutions. So really plan what you take and try to get rid of a lot of things. Second, use the chance to clean up. So every move is a good opportunity to get rid of things you don't need anymore. And honestly, that applies to migrations as well. So we checked analytics before we did our migrations, for example. So we did user surveys. We asked them, what features do you really need? What do you use? And then we decided, okay, the fancy design we had and we really liked, or the product owner liked, is not what people need. So we decided not to migrate them and get rid of them. Another point, not everything has to be perfect on day one. You don't need a fully decorated house, for example, um, on the day you move in. So it's a good idea to focus on what is essential. What do I really need? So I might need a kitchen and a bathroom for the start, but maybe not every picture has to be in place already. Sometimes it's good to live in a house for a moment and just feel it, and then you, yeah, get the idea what needs to be added on top. And same applies for software projects. It's a good idea to improve them over time and not to have the idea that it needs to be perfect right from the start. And that's a bit of a hard one to explain to your customers because you all know them, they want a lot. Um, Next point, new possibilities. Choose them wisely. I picked that example with a smart home setup. Maybe you can also relate to that. So there are crazy, fancy new things around, and you think you need all of them, but maybe you don't. So, yeah, just because something is possible or available doesn't mean it's the right choice, especially with all the new tools. Yeah, so pick wisely. And another hint, follow the instructions. I really love that picture. Um, we all have it. We all think we can figure out things ourselves, but sometimes it's not the best idea. And following the instructions usually saves a lot of frustration, even if we don't want to admit. So Sitecore has really put a lot of thoughts and effort into their instructions, giving best practices, etc. And it's all available for us as partners and the community. Um, yeah, so it makes sense to look at the instructions and follow them. It saves frustration. And finally, uh, build for change. As I said, it doesn't have to be ready on the first day, and you must be open to whatever comes. And it might not be your last move. It will evolve, it will go on. So the idea is not just to move into the new house, but really live in the new house and enjoy the new home. Mm. So that you really live in it. Yeah, that's it. So,
We have a couple of minutes for questions. Do we have any? All right.
Hi, great presentation. Just want to ask a question about Sitecore AI Pathway because you said it's not quite there yet, and I'm just wondering why do you think it's not quite there, and how can that product be improved in order to be there?
yeah, actually, we had a Sitecore user group in Germany where Sebastian Winter presented his experience with Pathway. Um, and there are still some manual steps, some things missing. So we just got the impression it's on a good way, but there are just some bits and pieces that need to be fixed. You only see those demos, and they only show step 1 and 4 or something, and the ones in between are not looking that good. So, um, but they are working on it, so it
Thank
might
you.
improve. Yeah,
Do we have another
right.
questions? Okay, I'm going.
Quite a big room, it's a long way for you.
Okay. Yes, great presentation. Thank you for sharing your experiences. You mentioned marketplace apps
Mhm.
that were very useful. Which could you share more or less which ones would be useful for us to look into deeper?
Okay, so from the public ones, we are using connectors, for example. So we have a DOM, as I said, we use Binder, and there's a brand new connector for Binder. So that's one of them. Um, and then we mostly did our custom marketplace apps. Um, Sorry? Yeah, we developed them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's really helpful because you can customize them. As I mentioned, we have a table component, for example, and it's really hard to edit tables with out-of-the-box tools from Sitecore. So we just created a custom field where you can say, add a table here. And then you have a nice UI where you can add rows, just as you know from Excel or something. So that's really helpful. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, let's go with questions.
Thank you. Can you share what your team setup and size was? Your team setup and size for both.
For both projects. Let me think. So it was different. I can say that in the beginning, we are a bigger company, so not the same people were available and still in that first project. So the first project is a Scrum project, and it's a really huge team for Scrum, I would say. It's around 10 developers, and of course, designer, QA, a product owner from the client itself. Let me think. We have 3 front-end developers, 1 CMS, 1 architect. What else do we have? I'm having help. So one of the project colleagues is here. Yeah, we have design, we have QA. Yeah, around 10 people. And with the second migration, it's a bit smaller. Yeah, I would say it's more or less. Yeah, we are only working part-time, so it's the same amount of people, but not doing a full-time job. And what we really noticed, front-end is king. So we have 3 front-end developers and just 2 hours of CMS capability or something per day. So that has changed. Yeah. So have you managed to get the mic working?
Yeah, I think
Cool.
so. Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. You mentioned Sitecore Forms wasn't cutting it for you. What did you use instead? Because we had the same problem.
It was just not there at the beginning. So now the first project actually is running with Sitecore Forms. In the meantime, so that was that move when we decided to start simple. So we only started with the sites without complex forms, and the simple ones we just created statically. So it was just a newsletter or something, just an API call. And now they are on site for forms. But in the other project, we are using Microsoft Dynamics, for example. So that's a good way to integrate. That's working quite well. Yeah.
Thank you. So my question regarding upscaling and training for non-technical people after the migration. Do you have any tips or tricks to get, for example, content editors on par so that they can also enjoy the new house,
The content editors,
for
how to
example? Like me.
educate them. Uh, Actually, we did some education events ourselves. So we did some workshops, etc., to share the knowledge. Yeah, and with developers, of course, they use what is available around here. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I already asked the questions. I feel like I've used to.
It's free. We still have time. Sorry, I was too fast. Usually I talk too long. So
Yeah, I was just wondering the first migration project because I think our current setup on XP probably looks fairly similar to what you previously had there. And obviously, if we were
like
to migrate towards Sitecore AI, I'm just curious as to how long that migration project took for you to complete, and also in terms of kind of hosting costs, for example, on Sitecore AI, how that might have compared with hosting costs on, I presume you may have been on Azure or something like that previously.
that's good. Yeah. Actually, I don't have the exact numbers. Of course, it took longer than expected, but it was not over 1 year, so you can't get points for that one. I would say it was half a year or something to really migrate that big project. And I'm not into numbers regarding costs, but it was more than expected, to be honest. And I could come back to you if you want to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Looks like that's it. Thank you very much, Anke.
Thanks.